see who has come to die.
So Grievous was finally released in Battlefront 2, and I'm going to take a look at the update itself. This video will act as feedback to said update. I know it's kinda late, but I had some stuff that got in the way. Mixer is also finally fixed, so that's nice. Let me make it clear that this is based on my experience after the patch, so you and other people may have had different experiences. I would also like to emphasize once again that this is my feedback to the update and not a patch rundown. The full patch notes via Reddit will be in the description for those interested. With this said, I will first go over the positive things that this update brought, and right off the bat, the new squad info implemented in the player HUD was one of the things that stood out for me. It is undoubtedly a positive to have visual feedback over your squad mate's current status, as it allows for planning in order for teammates to spawn on you, or vice versa. Which leads me to the spawn changes. Troopers can now spawn on everyone, that's infantry, reinforcements, and heroes, with some exceptions such as vehicles and Boba Fett. The same goes for reinforcements, they can spawn on all available spawn units, unlike previously. Heroes, on the other hand, can't spawn on anyone. Furthermore, you now get a notification and battle points whenever a squad mate spawns on you. I think all these changes are certainly for the better, but to be fair, it's hard to give coherent thoughts or impressions on them, as pre-mates can make a lot more use of this to gank and coordinate offensively than randoms. Well, for that to happen, it actually needed to make your pre-mates your squad mates, didn't it? Anyway, looking at the direction that's being taken, I hope the squad system continues to be polished. This is definitely the way to go if we are to have a decent squad system. The N1 Starfighter is now available in the mode Hero Starfighter, though I don't know why it took 4 months for this to happen, as when the mode was originally announced back in July. The N1 Starfighter was teased to be one of the available fighters within the game mode, and well, we all know that it didn't turn out that way. I guess it's better late than never. I personally don't play Starfighter modes as much as Galactic Assault and Heroes vs Villains, but that ship undoubtedly doesn't get as much time of day as the others in the game, and it's always good for it not to be restricted to one map only, that being the Naboo Galactic Assault map. Smaller, yet positive changes were also rolled out, such as Bosk's jump animation being improved, Kylo's Force Pull can now grant assists as well as kills, and the Wookiee nerfs that were a long time coming. Thank you. This is not everything though, like I said, I'll leave the Reddit link in the description for the full notes. However, by far the change that stands out the most for me was definitely the hero health on kill cards. They're fucking godsends. Now, characters such as Kylo Ren have the ability of being more viable in Galactic Assault due to these changes. There's, however, one choice regarding this that I have to question. Why is Phasmas card glued to her Staff Strikes, her most unreliable ability? It would make much more sense for it to be just a regular health on kill card rather than health upon ability kill. Characters such as Chewbacca, Yoda, and Finn also have ability-centric card instead of just regular kill. But those abilities are just far more reliable than Phasmas Staff Strikes. They are horrible. But is this because of the health buff she has? Like Finn and Yoda? Then what about Chewie? He has no such ability. Is it because of the fact that she's a blaster hero? Then what about Han, Lando, and Boba? They don't have an ability kill card, instead they have the regular health upon kill like most Saber heroes. If Staff Strikes was to be reworked, then I can see why it would be an optimal choice for her health card. If it was similar to say Vanguard, where you press the button and can use the staff for X amount of time as a melee weapon, then it would create an interesting dynamic. But the way it is now, it's just confusing, really. You may have noticed the footage where I try to land Staff Strikes. I don't think I should go too much over the ability itself, as the card is directly related to the update and not the ability. But just for clarity's sake, so you know what I'm talking about, Staff Strike's wind-up is way too long. The gap closing function of it doesn't always work. You can easily get staggered out of it by any melee hero, and you can be shot by your target while using it, so the lack of speed doesn't help whatsoever. In addition to that, having Phasma move forward with every strike results in occasionally missing the intended target. This results in what I think is a good looking ability, but one that isn't very practical. But anyway, let's move on to some collateral damage brought by the patch. That would obviously be the bugs. Now, a disclaimer before I get to this. I personally experienced these bugs after the patch, but other players have reported to be experiencing them prior to it. With this said, time to dig in. Queue times were remarkably lengthy after the update. This issue has later been fixed. Whenever I managed to get in the game in the meantime though, I kept getting random blank achievements and still get them in, I want to say every game, but I'm not entirely sure about that. However, they are incredibly persistent and annoying. This also marks the first time I've been cock-slapped by Qui-Gon's Force Ghost. This, however, appears to be a problem connected to Luke's attacks not registering immediately and having a crazy hit delay. In addition to that, I've had the attachments of my DC-15 LE made completely pointless for whatever reason, so I had to reattach them again in order for them to work properly. This has happened multiple times now, and it seems to be a problem tied with using other weapons without attachments. The character select in Geonosis' villains doesn't highlight the character you're currently hovering, and lastly, I experienced this bug that kept the junkyard lost indicator on screen. Needless to say, this was very confusing. This about does it here, but let's get into the main event of the update, General Grievous. Now, don't get me wrong when I say this. He is a beautiful baby boy. He both sounds and looks incredible. But he is a complete mess. And I know what I'm about to say might sound ironic when describing a cyborg, but he is also clunky and stiff. Please allow me to explain. Like most characters, Grievous has 3 abilities: Thrust Surge, Unrelenting Advance, and Claw Rush. We are going to spend a good deal of time discussing these. Both Unrelenting Advance and Thrust Surge are incredibly inconsistent, and that, in turn, makes them unreliable. They do look incredibly good, and props to DICE, this is something they excel at. Everything about Grievous just looks gorgeous, but in substance, it's just, like I said, a mess, and this could be said about the game overall as well. Unrelenting Advance is supposed to block everything from the front. I say supposed because of course it doesn't. The player can also move forward in a relatively slow pace, and as everyone is out for hero blood, more so the new hero's blood, might as well click the respawn option in the pause menu at this point. The sound for this ability also arbitrarily decides when it wants to play. Sometimes it will actually play the proper sound effect, and later, I don't know, it just decides not to do it, I guess. Add on top of that the fact that the ability just doesn't deal enough damage over time. The cooldown for the damage to proc is way too long considering the visual of the move. The ability also looks like this for everyone but Grievous for whatever reason. Pressing the pause button while using it in arcade also achieves the same end, but from the player's perspective. I've also somehow managed to do it without pausing. Please don't ask me how this works, I have no idea. Thrust Surge is a kind of point-and-click ability, and is undoubtedly the buggiest one he has. It doesn't register hits half the time. Okay, it might just be more than half. There are green and blue bars underneath the cursor that I assume serve as some kind of indicator. What do they do exactly? I don't know. Does the game explain what they're supposed to do? Of course not. Like I said previously, this ability is bugged beyond belief. Grievous can spin in place if used on an enemy that died, or if his turn rate can't catch the enemy highlighted. There is also this here that makes Grievous take damage for no reason when coming in contact with its structure? Really? This is, as you'd imagine, incredibly inconsistent and seems to be based on specific locations. There is also this one where he runs uncontrollably. Despite my many attempts, I wasn't able to replicate this. But what if I were to tell you that there is a way to make it so that he forcibly lands the ability? Allow me to introduce you to the camera stick. Well, I guess even a bug isn't immune to bugs. Moving on. Claw Rush is his most reliable ability, where he crawls on the ground while knocking people down he comes in contact with. Is it free of bugs? God no. When playing a match of Galactic Assault in Kashyyyk, I experienced this gem.
Do not cling to me like a Geonosis! Attack!
Defenses up!
No strategy.
Later, in Heroes vs. Villains, I got this where he supposedly comes out of the animation, only to go back to it, leaving me unable to reactivate the ability in order to cancel it, having only the choice of which direction I wanted to go. A shame that his most reliable ability can also be broken at times. Claw Rush also appears to deal damage over time though, so when used properly, it procs damage twice, killing any regular infantry unit. I have no idea if this is intended, but honestly, at this point, since everything else either puts you in a good position to perish, or just doesn't deal damage, might as well keep it this way. But the visual feedback of this ability isn't damage over time, more like a singular impact. However, it seems like they just can't code it as such. What makes me ponder this conclusion is that the same way that a speeder slightly touching you will deal damage multiple times, so will Grievous's Claw Rush. It looks like the only way to make this ability not deal damage over time would be to have it cancel upon impact with an enemy, which, please no. Claw Rush and Unrelenting Advance also behave strangely when falling from a high place. If you stop moving forward while using Unrelenting Advance, you'll find yourself unable to do much other than move around. The camera and the attacks just don't work until what I assume is the timing of the ability runs out. Claw Rush lets you move the camera, but you still cannot attack. Thrust Surge just cancels the ability, and you can move freely as well as attack. In this specific situation, it actually doesn't seem to punish you, like the other abilities. The same end can be achieved if you are interrupted. Don't get me wrong, all three of these abilities have their uses, but the only one that isn't extremely situational like Unrelenting Advance or exceedingly unpredictable like Thrust Surge is Claw Rush. Despite the few yet serious bugs, it truly is the only ability that can be used in most situations. It provides some necessary utility, damage reduction, as well as mobility. This is my reasoning that leads me to labeling it as the most reliable ability he possesses. General Grievous also has some movement issues. Besides the slow pace of Unrelenting Advance, it's kinda tricky to turn while using it, as he just snaps into a self-spin if the analog stick is just slightly pushed further. The ability also snaps where Grievous is facing and not where their camera is facing, which can result in some annoyance. Thrust Surge also has a problem on the finish. After using it, there is a slight delay before you can attack. Very similar to Yoda's gap closing, but not as noticeable though. Still, it's an issue. These, along with what I said before, are what leads me to say that Grievous is clunky to play as. So, right now you might be thinking that this is it. But is it? I'm afraid not. Grievous remains in a stun longer than any hero in the game, again, for no reason. I also saved a bug that I experienced after the patch, and since we're talking about stuns, it seems like an appropriate time to mention it. Palpatine now appears to be completely destroyed by stuns, as if these weren't obnoxious enough. He stays there longer than he should have. Contrary to other heroes, Grievous is also clunky on the spawn. It takes a while to finally control him, let alone show up on screen. This is also evidenced in the menu of the game. Grievous appears to be far more tasking to properly load on screen than other heroes. Is this it? Well, yes, and it's way too much. Overall, playing him feels like playing in a slot machine, hoping you end up winning the no bug spawn. But enough of that. Let's take a look at the basic attacks. Wait, what? 4. 4? He has 4? Fucking 4! Are you serious? Luke, Kylo, Vader, Rey, and Maul all have 12 basic attack animations each. If you include gap closing attacks and jumping attacks, that would bring Grievous to a 6, while every other mention would have 15. 15 instead of 14 because these heroes have 2 variations on the gap closing attacks. The difference is massive. Couple that with the fact that Grievous's dodge attacks are all the same, while the rest have attacks that are pulled from their basic attack combo, varying depending on the direction of the dodge, and it continues the combo from said animation. But there is one hero that is similar to Grievous, that I briefly mentioned in passing, and that would be Yoda. You see, Yoda has 6 basic attacks, a small number compared to everyone else, similar to Grievous. However, the reason why I think this works is because Yoda's attacks are all based on jumping. Combine that with his height and all the acrobatics, and this makes them hard to identify in the middle of combat. Regardless, he still has varying dodge attacks. If we were to include gap closing attacks and jumping attacks, that would make a total of 8 attack animations overall, 1 for each, just like Grievous. For clarity's sake, I call them gap closing attacks instead of sprinting attacks because you don't have to sprint to trigger it against an enemy, and it, well, closes the gap between you and said enemy. This is very self-explanatory. back to the topic at hand, Grievous is the saber hero in the game with the least amount of attack animations by far. A shame considering he has 4 arms and the same amount of lightsabers. Like, is this a joke? 4 arms, 4 lightsabers, 4 attacks? This is Grievous, not Jin. Where are the rest of the animations? Please give them back. He needs them. Well, I guess now's the time where I give you some suggestions, isn't it? Alright. Unrelenting Advance should be able to be cancelled by pressing R2, resulting in an overhead attack similar to what is seen in Revenge of the Sith. I also got the impression that the developers had some problem transitioning between the 4-arm stance into the 2-arm stance. So, since Grievous's attacks follow a horizontal-on-horizontal, cross-on-cross loop, Grievous's arms could go back to default during said overhead, and follow into the uncross attack, similar to his gap closing and the way it combos similarly. This would help when cancelling the ability, and would provide a flow that transitions into his normal attacks. Unrelenting Advance should block everything from the front, and I mean everything. That includes explosive damage, such as Chewbacca's Furious Bowcaster, as well as force powers. Pressing the block button with Saber Heroes blocks force powers, and I don't see how this ability should be treated differently as it follows the same rules. This should be consistent, as right now it feels worse than a regular Saber block. Another suggestion I have for this ability would be to crank up its DPS. Now, please hear me out. Unrelenting Advance's damage can be buffed without buffing its damage values. I would recommend nerfing its damage, but lowering the damage proc cooldown drastically. Meaning per hit, it would deal less damage, but overall its DPS would be buffed and would also fit the visual of the ability, contrary to what we have right now. This would punish players who stay in its range, which leads me to my final suggestions. Its hitbox is ridiculously small. The feeling I get from this ability is that I have to hit someone with my elbows instead of the fan sabers. The suggestion here being to properly adjust the hitbox or buff it slightly. If these are implemented, I can see the movement remaining the same. He feels slow, but if everything works the way it's supposed to, the slow movement can act as a countermeasure or something to sacrifice to be able to have such a defensive boost. If not though, the movement needs to be looked into, though the snap should definitely be looked into. Unrelenting Advance feels far too weak right now, and I think these changes would be for the best. As for the other abilities, fixing the bugs should be enough. Thrust Surge could deal with an attack flow improvement similar to Unrelenting Advance though. I love General Grievous. He's one of my favorite characters in the franchise, and to see him in a current AAA game was something I was hoping for a long time, so I'll play him regardless. I mentioned previously that Grievous looks absolutely amazing. His visuals accurately represent his movie counterpart. But I want to go a bit more over the sound aspect. The voice work provided by Matthew Wood, as always, does not disappoint at all. Neither does the sound design overall, besides his already beautifully crafted animations. The sounds accompanying them are superb. It can be noticed in something as simple as his walk. Staying true to his character, he often coughs after performing an ability, or he does so randomly. Furthermore, I would like to point out that I thoroughly enjoyed his options for customization, those being his skin, star cards, emotes, and victory poses. In these departments, he's near flawless, but these things need to supplement the gameplay, and while the looks and sounds are there, the gameplay seems to be lacking way too much polish. I sincerely hope the issues he has are fixed in the future, meanwhile improving on some of his weaker or disappointing aspects. That about does it. I tried to stay away from some of the more common criticisms directed at the game, and the ones that aren't related to the update as well. For example, the camera doesn't only affect thrust surge. Kylo's force pull can have its area of effect redirected if the camera's position is altered. I want to eventually make another video on Battlefront 2 that would act as a whole package for the game, but I'll make no promises. I love this game despite its numerous flaws, and the reason I point these things out is because I want the game to be better. It has the potential of being so much more than what it is now, and with Geonosis around the corner, this seems to be the right direction to go. With this said, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I hope to see you all on the next one. Take care, everyone.